nice.
Right.
All right. Just before we start, after this week, Dr. Lockshin is going to be taking a well-deserved, I guess, 3-week vacation, a 4-week vacation, 4-week vacation. 4-week vacation, and please God, we'll resume on July the 14th, I think is the Wednesday, and he's going to visit his kids in North America, and so we'll a little bit of a summer break, but Baruch Hashem, we'll have all kinds of learning going on, and Dr. Lockshin, I'll send you the link to the interview we did yesterday with Shira Mervis. I think you would find it quite interesting. It was really quite a fascinating interview. But anyways, let's get started with Pshat, Drush, and Halacha. Vakasha.
Thank you very much. We're going to do something pretty different today, different from the sessions that we've been having so far. I was actually originally planning to do this next week, but since there isn't a session next week because I'm going to be on an airplane at the time that the session would be meeting, I'm doing it this week. It's connected with the Haftarah that we'll be reading 10 days from now, the Haftarah about Yiftach. So I will share my screen here. And until now, of course, when you deal with Pshat, Midrash, and Halacha, usually you're dealing with texts from the Torah and not from the Nevi'im or Ketuvim. But there is an interesting Pshat, Midrash issue that has a connection to Halacha in this text from the book of Judges. A well-known and disturbing text from the book of Judges that begins, V'yiftach hagiladi haya gibor chayil v'hu ben isha zona, vayoled Gilad et Yiftach v'teled eshet Gilad lo banim v'yigdalu v'nei ha'isha v'yigareshu et Yiftach v'yomeru lo tinchal b'veit avinu ki ben isha acheret ata ויברח יפתח מפני אחיו, וישב בארץ טוב, ויתלקטו אל יפתח אנשים ריקים, ויצאו עמו. So we're introduced here to Yiftach the Gileadite, and we're told that he was an able warrior. He's a gibor chayil, but he was the son of a prostitute. Now, why are we given that information? Well, on the simplest level, it's because of the continuation of the plot here that his brothers, his paternal brothers from the legitimate wife kicked him out of the house. And then he collects a whole bunch of brigands, and he's a leader of a band of brigands that goes out raiding in the country. And then the Israelite people begin to have a difficulty. We'll skip over this part here. They're having a difficulty with the Ammonite enemy, and so they turn to him because he's a successful brigand. He knows how to gather people around him. And we were told, the first thing we were told about him is that he's a gibor chayil, an able warrior. And so he gets appointed the leader of the Israelites, and he takes the Israelites out on a campaign against the Ammonites. Before he does that, he delivers in the Haftarah that we'll be reading in 10 days. He delivers one of the longest speeches in the entire Tanach, where he definitely tries to avoid going to war, even though he's an able warrior, and even though he has been a leader of a band of brigands for a long time. He doesn't want to go to war, and he comes up with various historical and theological arguments why the Ammonites should not be making war against the Israelites, but it doesn't work. And the war goes on, and then towards the end of the Haftarah that we'll be reading in 10 days, we come to this ominous passage here. Vayidar Yiftach neder l'Hashem vayomar im naton titen bnei Amon biyadi v'haya hayotze asher yetzeh midaltei veiti likrati b'shuvim v'shalom mibnei
Marty, it's not coming through.
Yeah, I was wondering if that was only me, but that was
Hashem
everybody.
v'ha'alitihu olah. Okay, so now the translation is controversial.
Yeah, your sound,
But what you have here, the following vow to the Lord, if you deliver the Ammonite,
Dr. Lockshin, your
I'm sorry,
sound
what did you
is
say?
your sound is going in and out for the last 90 seconds or so, I would say. Most of what you said we couldn't hear.
Really?
Yeah. So I don't know if it's something with the
Okay.
internet connection, but I don't know if you're.
I'm not at home, but I thought that I had a good internet solution here, internet solution, and we'll see if that works better.
It's the tragedy of the story. That's what happened.
Yes, yes, it's the tragedy of the story. No, I don't have another. I'm just going to try again, and you'll tell me whether you're hearing me or not. I'm sorry.
Now I hear you. Yes, sometimes it's just a temporary thing. Sometimes it's a room in the house. You know, like I know in our house, and there's certain rooms that the internet connection is a little bit better.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know if turning off the video,
Okay.
somebody's recommending helps balance. I don't really know if that's true, but I guess we can turn off, people can turn off their video, maybe they help. But I don't think that's the issue. But
the moment we can hear him.
yes.
Okay, I won't turn off my video. Okay, so I was saying these are the controversial verses here. We will be talking about these verses, and the translation that you have of these verses is the JPS translation, but we will talk about whether this is a good translation. JPS says, Jephthah made the following vow to the Lord: if you deliver the Ammonites into my hands, then whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me on my safe return from the Ammonites shall be the Lord's and shall be offered by me as a burnt offering. Okay, now the people who put together the Haftarot that we recited in Shul decided that the end of the story should not be part of the Haftarah because the end of the story is so disturbing. So just shortly after this point in the story, the Haftarah finishes, but in the continuation of the text, I'm sure that we all are acquainted with the continuation of the text. Yiftach came home, and there was his daughter coming out to meet him with timbrel and dance. And she was an only child. He had no other son or daughter. It's difficult Hebrew here. Rak hi yechida ein lo mimenu ben ovat. If it said ein lo mimena, then it might make a little more sense. That would mean ein lo chut mimena, but it doesn't say mimena. It says mimenu. So that's not the topic that we're going to deal with here. But just for those of you who know the Hebrew, it's a difficulty. On seeing her, on seeing his daughter, he rent his clothes, he tore his clothes, and he said, alas, daughter, you have brought me low, you have become my troubler. He's seeing the whole thing's in personal terms. It's all about him. This terrible thing that you've done to me, as opposed to what she has done, what he's about to do to her. For I have uttered a vow to the Lord, and I cannot retract. Anochi patziti fi al Hashem v'lo uchal lashuv. Vatomer elav avi. פצית את פיך אל השם, עשה לי כאשר יצא מפיך. אחרי אשר עשה לך השם נקמות מאויביך מבני עמון. Father, she said, you have uttered a vow to the Lord, do to me as you have vowed. Seeing that the Lord has vindicated you against your enemies, the Ammonites. A deal is a deal. You made a deal with God that if God gave you victory over the Ammonites, you would do this. So go right ahead and do it. And then she continues. She said further to her father, let this be done for me. Let me be for 2 months, and I will go with my companions and lament upon the hills, and there bewail my virginity. Ve'evke al betulai. Leave me for 2 months, and let me be with my women friends. Go, he replied, and he let her go for 2 months. And she and her companions went and bewailed her virginity upon the hills. Vatefk al betuleha al heharim. I'll just mention another for those Hebrew fans here in the first verse here on the text, on this slide. The phrase "v'yaradti al heharim" is a very difficult phrase, because lared, that means to go down, and a har is a mountain. So what does it mean? That it might be a word for bewailing. It could be another word for bewailing, not connected to the standard Hebrew word yarad, which means to go down. After 2 months' time, she returned to her father, and he did to her as he had vowed. She came back to her father. Vayasla et nidro asher nadar. Vehi lo yad'a ish. She had never known a man. And here we have yet another problem with the text that we're not going to solve here. It seems like the division of verses is in a funny place, and the JPS translation just kind of ignores the division into verses. Vatihi chok b'Yisrael miyamim yamima telachna benot Yisrael letanot levat yiftach hagilati arbaat yamim bashana. So it became a custom in Israel for the maidens of Israel to go every year for 4 days in the year and chant dirges for the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite. Okay, here's the end of the story, an awful ending of this story. Four or five medieval Jewish commentators who are very interested in Pshat. But we're going to be looking at 4 or 5 medieval Jewish commentators who are very interested in Pshat, before you can find in classical rabbinic literature on the subject. So in Bereshit Rabba, we have a passage that says, there were 4 biblical characters who made inappropriate deals with God. They made inappropriate requests from God. 3 of them, God treated okay. In 3 of the cases, they received appropriate answers from God, but 1 of them received an inappropriate answer. And these are the 4, Eliezer, Kalev, Shaul, and Jephthah, Yiftach. Eliezer said inappropriately, when Eliezer was sent, the Midrash says that the servant that Abraham sent was Eliezer. That when Eliezer came there to Haran, he made the suggestion, let the maiden to whom I say, please lower your jar that I may drink, and who replies, drink, and I will also water your camels. Let her be the one that you have decreed to be the wife for your servant Isaac. Had some servant girl come out and given him water, would he have married her off to his master's son? That was a stupid deal, Bereshit Rabba says, because it could have ended up that it would have been somebody totally inappropriate for somebody like Yitzchak, just somebody who the only thing she has going for her is the fact that she offers water to someone who's thirsty. Nevertheless, God ensured that he received an appropriate answer. Zimen lo hakadosh baruch hu kehogen. God took care of the fact that the person who came out was an appropriate wife for Yitzhak. We won't see the stories of Kalev and Shaul. There are also stories of people making an inappropriate suggestion to God. If this happens, I will do this. But then the one that didn't work out right was Yiftach. Yiftach said, whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me on my safe return from the Ammonites shall be the Lord's and shall be consecrated to God, and I will offer it as a burnt offering. Even if a donkey or a dog or a cat came out. Okay, so let's say, Bereshit Rabba says, so let's say he didn't consider the fact that his daughter might come out. But there are, and when I've gone on archaeological tours here in this country, here in Israel, I've learned that people often had their animals living inside of their home. And I guess some of the animals would have been kosher animals that would be acceptable as sacrifices, but also people would have had donkeys in their homes, perhaps, or a dog or a cat, and you can't offer one of those as a sacrifice. This was a stupid thing that he said, and God caused an inappropriate outcome. When Jephthah arrived at his home in Mitzpah, there was his daughter coming out to meet him. He did something stupid, and God did not help him out of this stupid mess that he put himself into. The Midrash continues and presents a dispute of Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish, two great rabbis from the land of Israel from the 3rd century of the Common Era, that asked the question, if you make, okay, let's say he shouldn't have made a vow like this, but after he made a vow like this, what should he have done when his daughter came out? Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Hekdesh Damim Haya Chayav. Rabbi Yochanan says, if you make a vow like this, and your daughter comes out of the door when you come home from battle, then you should give to the Beit HaMikdash, to the temple, you should give the monetary equivalent of the value of his daughter. That's what he should have done. Reish Lakish Amar, afilu hekdesh damim lo haya chayav. Reish Lakish said, no, if somebody makes a vow like this, it's ab initio, from the beginning the vow is void. Titnan Amar if a man be a sacrifice, then lo amar klum. He didn't say anything, and so, of course, he did something inappropriate. But after he did something inappropriate, what should he have done? So Rabbi Yochanan said he should have given a certain amount of money to the Beit HaMikdash, and Reish Lakish says he didn't have to do anything because what he said was just foolishness. Now the text goes on then to annul this vow. Okay, let's assume that Yiftach the Gileadite. Let's assume. Contractor. Okay, let's assume that Yiftach the Gileadite was not knowledgeable about Jewish law. Wasn't there anybody alive who was knowledgeable about Jewish law? And for some reason, the Midrash assumes that Pinchas is still alive. Pinchas from the days in the desert was still alive at this time. So why did they not go to Pinchas and solve this problem? And the Midrash turns this into a moral tale about haughtiness and humility. Pinchas said, he needs me, I should go to him. And Yiftach said, I'm the chief captain of the Israelites, I should go to Pinchas. And so, there's this problem. Yiftach's trying to figure out what to do. And he says, I made this neder, I made this vow, I have to fulfill the vow. And couldn't he have gone to his local rabbi, to Pinchas, to get him to tell him, no, you don't have to do anything here? But because of the haughtiness of these two leaders, between this haughty person and that haughty person, the young woman was lost. Bein dein ledein avda hana'ara hahi. And so this turns into a moral tale about people who think that they can solve things on their own. They don't need any help. They don't need any advice. And that's how we lost this young woman. One more rabbinic text. There really aren't a lot of classical rabbinic texts that talk about Yiftach, but there was one, and here's the second one. In the Talmud and Ta'anit, they quote the verse in Jeremiah, "Uvanu et bamot habal lisrof et bneihem ba'esh olot labal asher lo tziviti velo dibarti velo alta alibi." Jeremiah castigating the people for offering child sacrifices, and he says, "This is thing that I never commanded, I never decreed, it never came to, I never even thought of this possibility, and they're doing terrible things like this." And to which the Talmud says, Asher lo tziviti zebeno shel Mesha melech Moab shenemar vayikach et beno habechor asher yibloch tachtav vayaleu olah. The phrase I never commanded refers to the story in 2 Kings about King Mesha of Moab who sacrificed his firstborn son. I never decreed lo dibarti ze yiftach. That's the reference to Jephthah's daughter. Velo alta alibi ze Yitzchak ben Avraham. So these are three cases of child sacrifice or near child sacrifice that the Gemara is connecting to the verse in Jeremiah, where Jeremiah is talking about child sacrifice. You might think that I am I'm walking us overly slowly through these texts, but it's because we're going to see an entirely different way of understanding this story coming up now. And I just wanted you to see that this is the standard Talmudic way of understanding the story. Then we reach the Pshat commentators of the Middle Ages. And here we have Rabbi David Kimhi, Radak, at the end of the 12th and the beginning of the 13th century in southern France. V'ha'alitiu olah, says Radak. Radak quotes the verse and says, "Dat rabotenu zichronam livracha b'zeh yadua." The opinion of our rabbis of blessed memory on this issue is well known. Okay, I know how the rabbis understood this text, but I don't understand the text that way. Adoni avi zal peresh, but my master, my father of blessed memory, this is Yosef Kimhi, also a great rabbi, earlier, of course, than Radak, in the middle of the 12th century in the south of France. Peresh, v'ha'alitihu havav bimkom o. You got the verse here at the bottom, underneath, in the third paragraph here on the Hebrew side. I gave you the verse again. Whatever comes out of my house towards me, when I come home successfully from this war, v'haya lashem, it shall be God's, v'ha'alitihu olah, or I will offer it as a sacrifice. So Radak says, read that phrase, V'haya lashem v'ha'alitiu olah, it shall be God's, or I will offer it as a sacrifice. Going back to the second paragraph here. Uferesh, V'haya lashem hekdesh im eino ra'ui le'olah, o ha'alitiu olah im ra'ui le'olah. Uchmo ze havav makeh aviv v'imo, o imo. There are a number of times, and this isn't just medieval Jewish grammarians who say this, but it's also, you can find it in Gazanius's Hebrew grammar and in the BDB dictionary, that sometimes the letter Vav in Hebrew has the force, in biblical Hebrew has the force not of and, but of as the force of or, as in the verse, he who strikes aviv v'imo, a person who strikes his mother v'imo. It doesn't mean that in order to be guilty, you have to strike both your mother and your father. But when the verse says makeh aviv v'imo, it means a person who strikes his father or who strikes his mother. And the same way, the Vav here should be understood that way. And Radak gives out marks here to his father. V'yafeh perish. My father interpreted the verse well. V'chein nireh mehapasuk. And that's the way it looks if you read the text. Ki lo hemita, he didn't kill her. She'amra, because she said, ve'evke al betulai. She says, I wish to go and bewail my virginity. Velo amra ve'evke al nafshi. Ach lo yada ish. What's the tragedy here? That she never got married. That lo yada ish. That she never knew a man, and that's what it says. Umasha amar gam ken vayas la nidro asher nadar velo amar vayaleha ola leot ki prusha hayta v'zehu et nidro asher nadar v'haya lashem. Furthermore, when the text says he did to her what he had vowed, but the text does not say he offered her as a burnt offering, this also proves that she was secluded as a hermit, or the word prusha could either mean secluded or it could just mean celibate, that she was celibate for the rest of her life. The words he did to her what he had vowed mean that she was consecrated to God. So those were the two possibilities. Looking back at the previous, let's go back to the verses and just look at the verses again. So the verse says here, "V'haya Lashem v'halitihu olah," which he's claiming means either she shall be dedicated to the Lord, or either that person or animal will be dedicated to the Lord, or that person will be offered as a burnt offering. And that's why she says, okay, let me go and bewail my virginity. And then she goes and she bewails her virginity. And then it says he did what he said that he would do. Okay, getting back to Radak here, V'zehu et nidro asher nadar. And then Radak says, this is the kicker here, as far as I'm concerned. That's the pshat. That's the pshat explanation of the verses, says Radak. V'divrei rabotenu zichronam livracha im kabbalah hi biadam aleinu lekabla. The rabbis, I know that the rabbis in the Talmud thought that Yiftach killed his daughter. And if they said that because they had some binding tradition, they had some Kabbalah, they had some Masoret about this, okay, I don't go against tradition. I will accept their midrashic understanding. So Radak is claiming that what it says in the Gemara is a midrashic understanding of the story. And Radak, we'll see now, was not the only person in the Middle Ages to make this argument. And the real question that's raised here is, what is Pshat and what is Midrash? Is Radak offering this interpretation because it really is the Pshat, it really is the simplest understanding of the text, or is he offering this because he's, like most of us, very embarrassed and disturbed at the idea that Yiftach would kill his daughter after after making a vow of this nature? Okay, we move on to another great commentator in the Middle Ages, Rabbi, Rav Levi ben Gershom, a few years after Radak. Siper shekvar nadar yiftach neder Lashem she'im yitain biyado et bnei Amon yeh Lashem asher yitzei mibeito b'shuvo b'shalom mibnei Amon v'yalehu ola im haya ra'ui lezeh. The text explains that Yiftach made a vow that if that which would come out of his home when he comes home victorious from the fight against the Ammonites was something that could be a sacrifice, he would make it a sacrifice. Obviously, says Ralbag, the phrase, whatever comes out of the house, the door of his house, has to be some living creature. That's the things that come out of the house are something that is alive. If it's a human being, it will become gods, dedicated solely to the worship of God. And that is why Jephthah tore his clothes when he saw his daughter coming out to greet him, for his vow necessitated that she would never marry a man. That he understood right away that the vow that he made obligated him to dedicate her to God, and that's what he did. He dedicated her to God, and of course, the tearing the clothes probably works better if you think that actually the text is saying that he killed his that he killed his daughter, but he says he tore his clothes because now he would have no descendants. Remember, the text there says he doesn't have any other children, and so now his only child is going to become, according to this understanding, celibate. And that means that the line will be cut off. There will be no continuation of the family. Yidmeh, says Radak, Yidmeh sha'asala yiftach bayit michutz lo ra'ata adam bo v'lo isha v'yashva sham. What Yiftach must have done is he built her a house somewhere away from where people live, and she never saw any human beings there, not even women. No one came to visit her. But first, he waited for 2 months for her to go off to the mountains with her female friends to bewail her virginity. And at the end of this time, he closed her up in the house that he constructed for her. She saw no one there, not even other women, except for 4 days each year. Now we've got a new interpretation of this custom. It says there that there's this custom of women going to the mountains, to bewail the daughter of Yiftach, to do that 4 days, 4 days every year. Know anything about but we don't know of any kind of custom like that. It certainly didn't last. That there is no festival that I know of times of recreating a dirge festival of women going and singing dirges in the mountains for 4 days for 4 days a year. But he says, no, that's not what the text meant. It meant that while she was alive, her by herself all the time, but her girlfriends would come 4 days each year, that the women would go to bewail her virginity together with Jephthah's daughter. They would go there and cry 4 days of the year, but she was separated. That's what Radak says. As all of you who have been at these sessions before know, I don't look at the chat beforehand, but I'm just guessing some of the comments that are coming into the chat. We'll see later on what's coming into the chat. This whole idea of taking a woman and putting her in a place where she will never marry and she will be dedicated to God. This might be sounding a little familiar to you, not particularly from Jewish circles, but everybody that we have seen so far, and everybody who we will continue to see, is Jews living in Christian countries, including the next commentator here. This is Abarbanel at the end of the 15th and the beginning of the 16th century, saying, "V'chein yera'eh she'asa Yiftach, שבצאת ביתו לקראתו לא המיתה ולא העלה אותה עולה, אבל הקדישה לגבוה, כמו שהוכיח מהפסוקים." And it seems that what Jephthah did to his daughter, he didn't kill her. He dedicated her to God, and I will prove this from the verses. His daughter said that she would go away and wander on the mountains. This is because she was about to be put into a house that she would never leave for the rest of her life. This is Abarbanel at this kind of turning point, the end of the Middle Ages, entering into kind of early modern Renaissance kind of times, talking about how this idea of being separated from nature really bothered her, and that's why she asked to be allowed to go for 2 months and spend the time in nature. So she's going to the mountains because So she asked to be allowed to go wherever she wished for 2 months to satisfy the urge for wandering and traveling. Tasbia rocha mehanedod vehahalicha. All of us who would like to go on vacations and like to see new places. I'm not sure how many people in medieval times had this idea that, oh, I have to get away, I have to see some new place. But at the end of medieval times, the beginning of early modern times, Barbanel understands this idea. Oh, I will never see another place other than Toronto. I'll be stuck there for my entire life. How could I have a fate like that? And so she said, could I please be allowed to go and exercise my Wanderlust, my desire for travel for a short time before I will be cooped up forever, before being put into quarantine, so to speak. Ya'an lo tanud v'lo telech od kol yomea. She'll never travel after this. She'll never go and see any other place after this. So she was upset at this idea. V'zehu, Barbanel says the same thing that we saw beforehand. Ve'evke al betulai shelo tinaseh od v'gam telech livchor makom yeshivata biprishut. So the 2 points here. That's why it says, I will bewail my virginity instead of bewailing the fact that I'm going to die. And also maybe the reason that she wanted to wander around, if she's going to be secluded, for the rest of your life, then go check out the mountains for a couple of months and find a nice place to be secluded for the rest of your life. The kavanati, and now finally, I assume that most of you were thinking in this direction, finally, Barbanel says it directly, the kavanati shemize lamdu umat edom la'asot batei prishut kleister lenashim sheyikansu shama velo yetzu misham kol yemehem velo yiru ish be'od b'chayim chayutam. I think that it's from this story that the nation of Edom, in other words, Christianity, learned to make houses of seclusion called cloisters for women who enter there and never leave those places for all of their lives. And they never see another man as long as they live. From the reading that I've done on the subject, it does not seem that cloisters, that monasteries, were created as a model on the Jephthah's daughter story, but I think that we can all say that all of these rabbis living in Christian countries and seeing the model of women who have been dedicated to God and who never marry, they take the world in which they are living and they apply it to this text. And, everybody can decide here how strong the arguments are from the fact that it says ve'evke al betulai, that it seems that the only thing that she's worried about is the fact that she is going to die a virgin. Does that clinch the interpretation as being the true interpretation of the text? We can talk about that when we finish. I will just mention that Abraham Ibn Ezra wrote a commentary on the book of Judges that is lost. And so we do not know what he said about the text, but we do know what he said about the text because he refers to it a couple of times in his commentary. For example, in his commentary on Deuteronomy 29, he notices that, I'll read this in English just to save time. Perhaps there is among you some man or woman or some clan or some tribe, I use different colors here, whose heart is even now turning away from the Lord our God to go and worship the gods of those nations. When such a one hears the words of these sanctions, he may fancy himself immune, thinking, oh, I'll just do whatever I want and nothing bad will happen. The Lord will never forgive him. Rather, will the Lord's anger and passion rage against that man? till every sanction recorded in this book comes down upon him and the Lord blots out his name from under heaven. The Lord will single them out from all the tribes of Israel for misfortune. So in the beginning, there were three different groups that were being described. And Ibn Ezra is going to argue that there are three different punishments here. If the sinner is an individual, he will die immediately. If it's a family, then every sanction recorded in this book will come down on it, meaning the sanctions will come down on them until their name is erased. And if it's a tribe, the Lord will single them out from all the tribes of Israel for misfortune. Like this verse, V'haya Lashem v'ha'alitihu ola ka'asher perashtiv. Just as I interpreted in my lost commentary on Judges, the verse, it shall be for the Lord, or I will offer it as a sacrifice. That in the verses here where it says God will do this and he'll do that, and if it's difficult here, Umacha Hashem et shmo mitachat hashamayim, the Lord will blot out his name, and then it said the Lord will single them out for misfortune. Well, if they're singled out for misfortune, then their name hasn't been blotted out. But all the vavs here, even Ezra says, they're all to be understood as or. Either this will happen, or this will happen, or that will happen. And even Ezra says, and I taught you about this in my commentary that I wrote on the book of Judges, when I told you that that's how you should understand the phrase, Vayal Hashem v'halitihu olah. So that's our first proof that the first, I used to, when I would teach these texts, I used to say the first Jew that we knew who offered this interpretation was Ibn Ezra. But recently I read an article written by Professor Josh Berman of Bar Ilan University, who actually pointed out that there were some Karaites who were offering this text before the days of Ibn Ezra and Abarbanel and Ralbag and Radak. So the first rabbinite who offered this interpretation is Ibn Ezra, and I have a further proof that Ibn Ezra offered this interpretation because Ramban viciously attacks Ibn Ezra for offering this interpretation of the text. At the end of Ramban's commentary on Vayikra, Ramban writes, this was the mistake that Yiftach made with his daughter. He thought that just as a cherem, the doom to put certain people to death, and also anyone who transgresses it is liable to the death penalty, so Jephthah thought that if he uttered a vow at a time of war to make an offering of a certain person or persons, the vow is valid. But he didn't know that he was misunderstanding halacha. There is another concept of cherem. Cherem is when there's a battle taking place, then the leader can declare that no one is going to take any booty from this, any loot from the battle, but it's all going to be cherem and it's going to be destroyed. So if a commanding officer, if the chief of staff of the Israelite army is able to do this, Yiftach that if you do that about the enemy, that meant that the leader was his mistake, and he thought that.
No, I was just going to say we missed the last.
That somebody from his.
Doctor, we missed the last about 30 seconds. It's been pretty good, but the last like 30, 45 seconds we missed. But it's been
Ramban is saying. Good. Sorry.
It's fine. Just
okay. So Ramban says. Okay. Right. Thank you. Ramban says that Yiftach's error was that he thought that if a Israelite commander-in-chief can make a cherem of the enemy, can declare that the enemy is going to be totally obliterated. There isn't going to be any booty taken in the battle, then of somebody on his side. So the story here is the story of mystery. There he'll explain what the concept of cherem is. And then he writes, do not let yourself be misled by Ibn Ezra's foolish words when he says that the meaning of the expression, I will offer it up, as if to say, if that which comes forth of the doors of my house be a man or a woman, that person shall be holy to God, inasmuch as he will abstain from the ways of the world, to stand to minister in the name of the Eternal in prayer and thanksgiving to God. But if it be something fit for an offering, I will make it a burnt offering. Accordingly, Ibn Ezra's interpretation continues. Ramban summarizing Ibn Ezra's interpretation. He, Jephthah, built her a house outside the city where she resided in seclusion, or you could understand that as meaning that she she resided in seclusion, and he provided her with sustenance all her days, and no man knew her, so that his daughter remained shut away from the world all of her life. Ramban says this is a foolish interpretation. These are empty words. For if he vowed that some person shall be the Lord's, this does not mean to be celibate, but instead it means to be like Samuel, of whom his mother said, I shall give him unto the Lord. And he was a servant in the house of God, but he wasn't celibate. So, why would you say this? Okay, we'll accept the concept that somebody might be dedicated to God, but dedicated to God doesn't mean celibacy. Ramban goes on, according to the laws of the Torah, no man can utter a vow which would bind persons who come out of the door of his house to live in celibacy, just as he cannot bring them as an offering. Just like you can't make a neder, you can't make a vow that if a person comes out of my house at a specific occasion, I will offer that person as a sacrifice. You can also not make a vow that says if a person comes out in a certain situation, then that person, I will make that person be celibate. And if the matter be so, as Ibn Ezra put it, then Jephthah's daughter, there's a curious argument coming up now from Ramban. And if the matter be so, as Ibn Ezra put it, then Jephthah's daughter, who bewailed her virginity together with her companions, was like harlots enhancing their hire. What do we got here? We got somebody complaining about the fact that she's never going to have any sexual activity in her life. Heaven forbid that this be a custom in Israel to lament the daughter of Jephthah the Gileadite 4 days in a year because she didn't marry but worshiped God in purity. If that's what the text actually means, then if she became dedicated to God, then why would there be all this sadness about it? So if you thought the Ramban would be saying that Judaism doesn't believe in celibacy, which I think is what I'm sure a lot of people are thinking here, he's saying actually the opposite. That if Ibn Ezra is offering an interpretation like this, and he only knew Ibn Ezra, he didn't know that Radak and Ralbag and Abarbanel also offered this same interpretation. He said that they're making sexual activity into being more important than it actually is. Rather, the subject is to be understood in its Pshat. Back to the question of Pshat and Midrash. Remember, Radak said what the rabbis said on the subject was Midrash. I'm offering Pshat. If the rabbis tell me that I have to accept the authority of the Midrash on this subject, I will, but I don't think that that's the Pshat of the text. And then Ramban comes along and says here, no, the Pshat is that he killed her. Jephthah sacrificed her, and his mistake was, as I explained, he misunderstood halacha. He thought that he was obligated to do this, and he wasn't obligated to do this. It's a fascinating text because Each side thinks, of course, that the Pshat is on their side, but that's not so unusual. And in the book that the famous book on Pshat and Drash, written by Professor Rabbi David Weiss Halivni, he says that at a certain point in history, Pshat started to mean the correct interpretation instead of the simple interpretation of the text. And of course, you all know the joke that Pshat means what I say and not what the other person says. So everybody says, of course, what I am saying is the Pshat. So we have the attempts of four great medieval rabbis living most of their lives, all of them living most of their lives, and some of them living all of their lives in Christian countries, who are rereading the Yiftach story in a different way from the way the Yiftach story was read in classical Talmudic literature. And I guess every one of us can decide whether they did a job of finding the original correct lost meaning of the text, or were they just perhaps like embarrassed about the text of Yiftach killing his daughter, embarrassed, troubled, whatever, and then they offer a different kind of interpretation. I'll now open up the chat and see what people suggest. Yiftach is a little like the early Reish Lakish. Yes, that's true. Reish Lakish is talking about Yiftach, and Reish Lakish himself began the life as a brigand. Okay. The way I heard it, Jephthah was too proud to go to the high priest. Jeff or Martha said, yes, the priest, yes, you said that in the text. We saw that later on in Bereshit Rabba. Yiftach's mother was a woman of the evening, but his daughter is as pure as the driven snow. That's interesting perspective that iPad is offering to us. Yes. Eliezer didn't make a vow, just a request. That's true. Yiftach swore an oath. Why does the Midrash compare them? You know, the Midrash doesn't use the word vow. It just says sha'alu kahog, shalu shalo kahog, and they made a request of God, but it wasn't a vow. You're right, there is a distinction though. So, was Yiftach Pinchas a story about not needing advice or about standing on one's status? It could be read either way, Ellen. I'm happy with either of those interpretations. Pinchas killed for the Lord two people, and now the Midrash wants him to be able to spare a life instead of being sacrificed to the Lord. Is this repentance or just full circle? Interesting. He had, according to this Midrash, he had a possibility of saving a life, and he didn't. Susan writes, didn't she become like a Nizirah? Yes, and that's what we saw, that the four different medieval commentators were suggesting. Did she need 2 months to just bewail her virginity, Bina asked? Okay, I don't know. I don't know how long it takes to bewail your virginity. Dedicated to Lord is a strange phrase. Other than Nazir, are there other uses of this? What about Shmuel? Very good, as we saw in the continuation. Ramban compares it to Shmuel. And Steve, you say the same thing that we saw later on in Ramban, that being dedicated to the Lord isn't celibacy, celibate. So why should she be in some of the texts on this subject that support the celibacy theory? There is the suggestion, the kind of sexist suggestion, which I remove. I shortened all these texts as I do very often, but there's the sexist suggestion in some of the people who support this, that for a man to be dedicated to the Lord, there are many different ways in which a man could be dedicated to the Lord. So some of the text suggests that for a man to be dedicated to the Lord, there's many ways in which a man can be dedicated to the Lord, but a woman, there's only one way that she could be dedicated to the Lord, through celibacy. But it is a very good question. Did she need 2 months to just bewail her virginity, your life? are always, yes. Even Ezra didn't start off life in Christian countries, but he ended up in Christian countries. According to the rabbis, could Yiftach remain a leader of Israel if he had made a human sacrifice? Would he be liable for a death penalty as a murderer? Reish Lakish's take solves most of these issues. I assume that that rabbinic literature would find Yiftach's action to be murder. Would it be murder in the first degree? I don't know. How did she survive? Some of the commentators say that people used to come and leave trays outside of her, outside of the place where she was, bringing. Somebody came around, but they didn't see her. Barbanel implies that Jephthah's daughter took years before going to nunnery university. Yes, she took a gap year. That's right. That is what Gershon is suggesting: a 2-month gap year before you go off to nunnery university. Good suggestion, Gershon. Epi, when I was an undergrad, I was taken by the monastic life and actually spent some time with Trappist monks. Really, Epi? You never told me about that. A professor of mine at JTS got concerned, and I asked them why our tradition didn't have similar mechanism for spiritual retreat. I was also, by the way, taken by Gregorian Chad. He answered that we do have such a mechanism, and it's available to all Jews, not just an elite group, and it's part of family life, not a celibate experience, and it's called Shabbat. That's our way of escaping from the world. Very nice, Epi. Very nice point that your professor made. Ramban is in the path of Reish Lakish, that nothing, yes, correct, that nothing had to be done. And is this Ramban who might be the author of Igeret HaKodesh? Yes, it is. And still he's making that kind of surprising comment about sexuality. That I find this unusual. What makes this text important to us and to our lives? Okay, I like the challenge of questions like that. So first of all, I think that all of us who gather together for these sessions are interested in interpretations of the Bible and reading earlier interpretations of the Bible and trying to understand. Trying to develop criteria that we can use for judging between interpretations of the Bible. And we've got this giant gap here between two schools of thought about a text. I don't know, some of you, I assume that there were a couple of people here at least who didn't know beforehand about the kind of celibate explanation here that Yiftach did not kill his daughter. And so on the simplest level, we've been introduced today to two different ways of looking at the same text that are extremely different from each other. And I think that's some people might feel better, and I'm guessing that the four great rabbis in the Middle Ages felt better about this text once they came up with this interpretation that it isn't really a story of killing a daughter, but a story of a daughter becoming celibate. You might like that. You might not like that, but will this affect my behavior as a Jew tomorrow? The proper understanding of this text? Probably not. Third way, LAB, a great tragedy, no blame. Herb suggests whole dance, but Yiftach has the woman twirl far away from the man and then be taken back. Thank you, Justin. Didn't know that. Very nice. And Marty writes, Elie Wiesel tells this story in one of his books. He faults Yiftach for not getting the vow annulled by the elders of his generation. As we saw that as we saw in Bereshit Rabba. Yes, what you're right, Marty, is correct. That's as we saw in Bereshit Rabba. Yeah. Isn't this rabbinic law into a generation when it didn't exist? Of course, it is, but that's what the Talmud does. It tries to read rabbinic law into earlier times. Okay, I apologize for the internet, and I'll be back at when we pick up again in a month. I'll be back in my home, and where the internet is more reliable. And I'm sorry that I wasn't there today. And I wish you all a pleasant month. For those of you who are here in Israel, it's almost Chodesh Tov.
Marty,
yes.
Marty, when I went to Associated, I was only taught that she wasn't killed, but that she became like a nun. Like they did not teach us that she died. They taught us that when it was sent away, her father couldn't kill her. And that's how we were taught when I went to school.
Interesting. When I went to Associated, I learned that she died. We were not in the same class, Susan, but we're not so different in age. We're close to each other, but we had different teachers.
That's right. Because it's funny, because when I learned the part about she really died, I was, oh my God, that's not what we learned.
Okay,
for me, it was the opposite. When I learned that somebody said that she didn't die, I said, "Oh my God, you're pulling my leg. That couldn't be. I've known all of my life that she died. How can you?"
Okay, and when I went to Associated, I don't remember learning the story, but that's probably me as a student. I don't know, but so I think I went to Associated after the two of you went.
Yes, I was actually. You were in grade 3, and you were in Miss Biscold's class, and sometimes you came down to our class for movies and stuff.
Sorry, when was this? What class were you in?
You were grade 3.
Right, when I was in grade 3.
You had Mrs. Biscold, but sometimes the grade.
No, when I was in grade 3, I was in Beth Emeth, because Associated had 1 to 4 in Bathurst Manor. Those of us who lived in Bathurst Manor.
That must have been one of your brothers, because I remember your father
maybe by my brother, but he was in Finch. But I was in Beth Emeth from grades 1 to 4, Neptune grade 5, and then in grade 6, Finch opened up. That was the year.
That
Finch
it was one of your brothers, because your father.
And then back to Neptune for 7, 8, and 9.
Okay.
Bereshit's commentary gives
I don't know what in the world we're talking about, but Associated is the largest.
I apologize to all.
In Toronto. So whatever. It's been around a long time, and we are graduating. A number of graduates here from Associated.
Bereshit's commentary says that she was put away in a cloister.
Yes.
Secluded.
Anyways, okay, thank you. We'll talk later to figure out. I don't know.
I'm sorry.
How many grades apart we are? But anyways, okay, 1 p.m. Sefer Yirmiyahu. Simi Peters, everybody welcome. The same station, this same Torah Motion station. That's at 1 p.m. and at 8 p.m. this evening, also on the same station. Everything's on the same station except like we yesterday's talk with, but generally everything's on the same station. And tonight, Moshe Sokolov on this week's Haftorah, not the Haftorah of Haftorah of the week. So that'd be tomorrow morning, Shuli Mishkin at 11 a.m. Continuing her tours of Israel. Rabbi Freundlich from Montreal, TBDJ, the big shul in Montreal. For those who may not know, that's used to be many years ago David Hartman shul. Before David Hartman made Aliyah, he was the rabbi of the largest shul in Montreal. So anyways, that's tomorrow, 8:30, our Parsha Shir, and then 9:30 a.m. I'll be giving the Pirkei Avot Shir, please God, on Friday. So we look forward to learning with you and inviting your friends. And like I said at the beginning, let us know your ideas. And we want to wish Dr. Lockshin a nice vacation, a nice trip. Thank you for your insights. And we look forward to returning with you on July the 14th. Vakasha. And thank you very much. And everybody have a wonderful day.
Very
we'll
good.
About those who can make it in 55 minutes or so for Sefer Yirmiyahu. Okay, all the best, everybody. Thank you.